So this will be a video on the formative assessment of addition of vectors that we gave you last time. Before our synchronous session, we're going to be discussing the correct answers before we gave you another video for your review, for your attendance, I mean, for this asynchronous session. Sige. So let's try to answer. What are the two ways in adding vectors? We mentioned this already. You have graphical and analytical. In adding vectors graphically, how do we illustrate the next vector? We add vectors usually in terms of graphical gamit ang head to tail. Okay, so yung buntot niya, yung head ng arrowhead, nilalagay yung buntot ng next vector. In scaling the vector, if the scaling of the vector is 1 kilometers is to 2.5 inches, how many inches should you illustrate if the next resultant vector is 10 kilometers? So this is basically scaling. So ang mangyayari is 25 inches. Please do not mind this one kasi hindi dapat siya equal. 1 kilometer is 2 inches. So dapat colon yung ginagamit. So this is the common mistake that usually some people do, which yung some people ay ako. So, hindi siya equal kasi dapat is 2 po siya kasi scaling siya. Next, graphical method in terms of vector addition is prone to error because the answer is all of the above. Because technically, ang thickness of the pen affects the recorded value. The person can either be having some random errors in terms of drawing, and then it's limited how precise your illustration is. So, I hope that's clear. Next, kaya po, in terms of graphical versus analytical method, as I've mentioned in my classes as well, there will be errors in terms of graphical comparing it with analytical. However, the errors should not be that great. Dapat at least pag round up mo si duwang values, they could be getting the same values. Halimbawa, the exact value is 77.69 pag abot sa graphical. So it means that in analytical kasi exact na niya siya. So in graphical, we could assume that you would be getting 78 or at least 77 or 76. Dapat very minimal lang po siya. Which method of vector addition pertains to the use of geometry and trigonometry? This is analytical method. Which of the following quantities pertains to the resultant vector? This is basically your displacement vector. The resultant vector is just your displacement vector. So it's the distance between the initial point to the final point. Again, take note initial to the final point. Next, given the vectors A is equal to 2 meters east, B is equal to 11 meters north, what is the magnitude of the resultant vector? So kung magnitude yung gagamitin natin, that's the square root of 2 squared plus 11 squared, you'll be getting 11.18 meters. So I need not to explain this kasi two vectors lang naman to, and this is basically using cardinal directions. From which quadrant? So east and then north, that's in Q1 or the first quadrant. So we are expecting that the bearing is north of east. Okay? Given two vectors, with what will be the direction? In terms of direction, the tan inverse of alin yung y? 11 over 2. Tan inverse of 11 over 2 is 79.70 degrees. Since it's positive, it's north of east. Do we need to use vertical angles? No, because it agrees that the quadrant should be in the first quadrant. So, in terms of standard position, pag sanabi ko na nga, pag north of east, that's already considered to be in the standard position. And then, so it's just 79.70. Ayan. So, hopefully, nag-gets itong part na to. Now, here, pinapasulat yung tamang answer. Let's answer this first kasi hindi natin siya masasagutan na hindi pa natin siya nasa-solve. So, ito yung gagamitin natin. So, the given that we have are the following. We have vector A is, let me just draw it here. Vector A, kita ba? Yan. Vector A versus vector B. Vector A is 2 meters, 14 degrees north of west. Vector B is 30 degrees west of north. Nakalimutan natin yung magnitude. 11 meters, 30 degrees west of north. So, if this is your quadrant, kung ito-drawing natin north of west ay siya ay nandito, ang west of north naman ay nandito. Okay? So, In terms of standard position, if we're going to find it in the standard position, this is 90 plus 30, while this one is 180 minus 14. So you'll be getting 166 degrees. This is 120 degrees in standard position. Next, we do the long method. Pero in terms of, since alam naman natin, gawin ko na lang yung shortcut. X and Y component, you have 2 cosine 166, 2 sine 166, 11 cosine 120, and then 11 sine 120. So the values that I will be getting, just pause this video if you want. It's negative 1.94, negative 5.5, and then 0.48 and 9.53. So, move lang natin tong isa para makita natin. So, in terms of summation of x's, summation of x, and then summation of y, kasi alam naman natin to, summation of x will be negative 7.44 meters, and then 10.01 naman dito. What can we observe? It's negative and positive. It's in the second quadrant, so we can assume that the direction is north of west. So, in terms of theta or the angle, we can solve for the angle already. Tan inverse of the summation of y over summation of x. So, this becomes the tan inverse of 10.01 divided by negative 7.44. Hopefully, you can see my handwriting. The angle becomes negative 53.38 degrees. So, ito lang yung angle. Let's proceed with angle with bearing. Angle with bearing, dito na lang ha. Angle with bearing, so kada drawing natin, siya ay nandito sa negative 53.38 or negative 53.38 degrees south of west. South of east, I mean. Kasi clockwise yung direction niya. Do we need to use vertical angles? Opo. Dahil nandito yung angle quadrant natin. Sabi niya nasa second quadrant north of west. That's why we get the opposite of this one. This becomes 53.38 degrees north of west. So that's your angle with bearing. How about your angle in standard position from the east? So this becomes, erase na lang natin to. Angle in standard position naman tayo. Angle in SP is just 180 minus 53.38. Your angle in standard position is 126.62 degrees. Tingnan natin yung mga answers natin kung tama. Yung magnitude pa pala, nakalimutan natin. Sorry, the magnitude of the resultant vector. Sige, kasi tapos na rin naman to. Magnitude of the resultant vector is a square root of 7.44 squared negative plus 10.01 squared. Maliit lang kasi yung space natin. So, the resultant vector is 12.47 meters. Let's try to answer the questions. Ang sabi dito sa first question, given two vectors, what is the standard position of vector A? Ang answer natin kanina ay 166. Sulat nga natin. Ayan. So, tama. Pag naglagay tayo ng 167, lumalabas ata na mali yung answer natin. Hindi na. Okay. So, 166 yung answer natin. Given two vectors, what is the standard position of vector B? Vector B is 120. Given two vectors, what is the summation of x? Negative 7.44. And then, what is the summation of the y components? 10.01 kasi na-solve na natin. Magnitude of the resultant vector 12.47, and then the angle in standard position is 126.62. So submit natin, dapat perfect yung score ko. Yun lang, non-response. Sige, I'm check. I'm just gonna pause this. Ayan, so you can see I got the correct answers except for this one kasi na-skip ko pala siya. So I got 19/20. So, tama yung answers natin. So, you can just go back to this video to review. So, ito yung common mistake. Huwag tayong makakalimot na mag-answer. Okay? So, the next video will be more on examples.